everybody! Welcome to A Survivor's Guide to Hell. I'm PJ Aubrey, here to walk you through this pessimist-friendly guide to finding the silver lining. Each week we challenge our listeners to take a closer look at the bright side of things, with uplifting stories, ideas for self-improvement, and the occasional change of perspective. Thank you so much for listening! Today our unpleasant topic is... Being Broken, Part 2. When it comes to feeling broken, we've got some good news to help fill in your cracks. Let's go. Broken is the word we use to describe a shattered teacup, a damaged pot, or a compromised work of art. It's also the word we use to describe ourselves on our very worst days. We have a break up when we feel betrayed by a trusted significant other. We have a break-in when a criminal damages our home and violates the privacy of our lives, when our life plans are annihilated by some terrible event, or when we experience a loss that seems to leave a gap in the core of our soul. We have broken hearts. We have a breakdown. As a person, we are broken. Even if you've experienced none of these things, you still know what it means to break. You've had a worst day ever. You've had a broken heart. There have been times that left you gathering up your pieces, and life can be very creative when it comes to breaking you apart. Then again, life can be very creative about making things right again. It's time for episode 2 of this 2-part topic of being broken. First, we'll finish last week's interview with Celine Santini, who is a TEDx speaker, author of Kintsugi, The Art of Resilience, and an expert on the beauty of being broken. Celine will share with us the 6 steps of Kintsugi, an ancient Japanese art of repairing objects with gold, and how even people can be works of Kintsugi. Then we'll cover the story of Emil J. Fryrei, a man with a broken childhood and a habit of breaking the rules that were keeping thousands of children from surviving a bloody disease. Let's get started! Act 1. Kintsugi. What happens when you mix pain with gold? Last week, the lovely Celine Santini explained what Kintsugi is.
If you break an object, instead of throwing away the pieces or hide the repair, you actually decide that you will underline all the scars with real gold. So that means that if you get this broken object, it's repaired, and you see all the repair with a line of gold instead of just glue.
In other words, a Kintsugi piece can be any broken object, typically a dish, that has lines of gold fusing the old cracks together. It is watertight, physically stronger than before, more valuable, and more beautiful. If you missed last week's podcast, I highly suggest listening to the first half of Celine's interview, where she explains this process in greater detail, including Kintsugi's origin story and how she discovered the art in the first place. Now, as promised, Celine will describe the 6 steps of Kintsugi and how they have become a beautiful metaphor for our cracked open, split up, and beautifully imperfect lives.
Do you want me maybe to get through the 6 steps?
Yeah.
So, well, the first step is, of course, the step when you break, when you've got all these scattered pieces on the floor.
Yes.
And here, of course, the metaphor is you suddenly have a shock in your life. Whatever the shock is, it's like you are on the floor. You don't even know if you will be able one day to stand up again. And at that point, you might have no hope. So this is where you have the choice of throwing away the pieces, or you have the choice to say, no, I will gather all my pieces. I don't know if I will make it, but I will try to gather my pieces, and I don't know how long it will take, but I will decide to repair myself. That means that you think that you are worth it. And the second step is the step when you start to assemble the pieces. And then you use this special lacquer I mentioned before, and you mix it with flour, and this creates a kind of paste, like a cement. And we have this brown scars at that step. And here the metaphor is very important. You might miss a piece. You might say, oh, this piece is too much smashed, or it's I lost it. And you've got this like hole in your repair. And in real life, you might say, oh my God, I can't repair myself. But no, because Kintsugi has always a solution. Kintsugi can create another piece. So there's always a solution. And if even better, we can even integrate in the repair a piece from another object. You can imagine how beautiful that creates an effect. It's like 1 + 1 = 3. So here the metaphor is that we can always find a solution, but we can also seek the solution from outside. We can seek help when we need it. The third step is the one when we have to wait these 8 to 10 days to dry the lacquer in a special box. And of course, here there's another metaphor because it's about waiting. It's about if you took the object too quickly from the box, like in maybe 2 days instead of 8. Imagine the repair is not complete. It would compromise the whole process. You know, in the 21st century, we want things here and now. We order pizza, we have a pizza in 5 minutes.
Yes.
We want to film a movie, we have it like in the next seconds. We want a date, we go on Tinder. It's like, we don't wait anymore. And Kintsugi is here to say, knock, knock, you have to wait sometimes because if you pull on the leaves of a plant, it won't grow faster, you know?
You're
so
right.
It's about embracing patience, and that's so important. The step 4 is about repair. They use this special lacquer. This time they use the red lacquer and to make the bowl especially watertight. So all the brown scars become red at that stage. So here the metaphor is like, imagine this beautiful repair with red lines. It's like a bit like veins, like the blood flowing into the object. It's not scary, it's more about embracing life. It's about life coming back, like you are almost there. And then after, there's the shining process, when they finally put the gold powder with the process I explained before on this red lacquer. They sprinkle gold powder and each particle of gold melts into the red lacquer and creates these beautiful golden lines. And obviously here the metaphor is the one I mentioned before about embracing who you are in your unicity, in your totality, and in your uniqueness. Like it's your own personal path that you are proud of and you are displaying to the world. And initially I thought that there were just 5 steps and that we could stop here. But there's a secret 6th step. It's optional, but I love it. They consider that it's a metal, it's gold. What happens if you polish a metal? Obviously, it shines. Like each golden line will sparkle. And here I think the metaphor is about inspiration. It's about inspiring people who are maybe at that stage 1 or 2 and they need hope. And here you are at step 6, so you know what you've been through, but you know that now you're repaired and you're okay and you're shiny and you're beautiful. So if you tell it to the people who are still in difficulty, in pain, it gives them hope that they will be one day at step 6 as you are.
I'm inspired right now. I've never actually crafted kintsugi, but now I know I have to go try. That's awesome.
Yes, it's something I recommend you do. As I said before, it's my mission in life to spread the word on kintsugi. Mm-hmm. So if an individual person has a question, I'm always there. If you want more interviews or more conferences, I am always there. As I said, it's what I enjoy doing. It's not about just a job for me. It's about my little contribution to the world. So yes, please contact me if you feel this momentum, this need.
Act 2. Emil J. Fryrei, the worst employee to ever cure cancer. I would not want to work with J. Fryrei. Fryrei was the tough-as-shoe-leather child of Hungarian immigrants. He probably wasn't so much born gritty and dogged as he was formed gritty and dogged. Jay was young when the stock market crashed in 1929, stripping his family of everything. It wasn't long after that his father committed suicide, leaving the young boy and his impoverished mother to fend for themselves. In his astounding book, David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants, Malcolm Gladwell describes Fryreich's turbulent upbringing. According to the book, Fryreich's mother was something of a cold woman. Hard to blame her, seeing as she was a young widow that spent her days toiling in Great Depression-era sweatshops while a nanny tended to her son at home. Fryrei came to view this nanny as his real mother, but this image was shattered when his biological mom remarried and the nanny was fired. That event would deeply embitter Jay, to the point where he blocked out many of the memories of this period. Against the odds, Fryrei would eventually graduate medical school. He was skilled when it came to medical expertise, but terrible with his bedside manner. He doggedly pursued the health and survival of his patients, but had no interest in empathizing with them. His mission was to save their lives, not their feelings. Fryrei had a temper. He was stubborn and disruptive. Like I said, I wouldn't have counted myself lucky to work with such a man. It's reasonable to assume that his cold, bitter childhood had planted something cold and bitter in Fryrei himself, robbing him of the polite composure one would hope for in their care provider. Fryreich's childhood really was a broken one, and someone who knew the man in his worst moments may argue that he himself was broken through and through. However, the same traits that made Fryrei feel impossible to work with also made him impossible to deter when an ungodly task demanded attention. Fryrei worked in the children's leukemia ward. At the time, it was a desperate, bloody place. Kids usually bled to death before the cancer would kill them, but even if they didn't, there was no good method for treating their disease. These children were certain to die. Any location filled with dying children is already made of the stuff of nightmares, but this medical ward had a little more hell painted over it. Jay said, "The kids bled from everywhere. Their stool, urine, that's the worst part. They paint the ceiling. They bleed from out of their ears, from their skin. There was blood on everything. The nurses would come to work in the morning in their white uniforms and go home covered in blood. When they came to the hospital, 90% of the kids would be dead in 6 weeks. They would bleed to death. If you're bleeding in your mouth and nose, then you can't eat. You stop eating. You try to drink, you gag, you vomit. You get diarrhea from the blood in the stools, so you starve to death. Or you get an infection and you get pneumonia, then you get fever and then you get convulsions, and then..." Fryreich's voice trails.
And if you can imagine a 4-year-old child in his mother's arms, bleeding to death, that's what we had to face. So Dr. Zubrod came on rounds one day and he said, "Fryreich, you got to do something about the bleeding, because none of the chemotherapy could be administered because the children died of hemorrhage before we could get to them." Hemorrhage and infection combined accounted for 95% of the deaths before leukemia could get them.
That was Fryrei himself. You'll hear a bit from him in this story. We'd like to thank Baylor College of Medicine for that. This leukemia ward is a place that very few parents could envision for their children without feeling a deep sense of pain, especially if they thought the presiding doctor could be such a cold, tempestuous man. But Dr. J. Fryrei, despite his cold composure, wasn't one to merely sit and watch the kiddos bleed to death. Fryrei and his colleague, Tom Fry, began transfusing platelets to the children. It broke the rules, and was against the advice of the world expert at the National Cancer Institute. But Fryrei and Fry had done their research, and they were faced with a slew of children who had nothing to lose. The transfusions flowed. The kids stopped bleeding to death. Now the doctors could actually address the cancer. The standard at the time was to use as few drugs as possible. Chemotherapy was already around, a single drug that reduced the cancer, but never quite cured it. As one of the textbooks stated, drugs cause more harm than good because they just prolong the agony. The patients all die anyway. The drugs make them worse, so you shouldn't use them. With that kind of understanding in the medical community, it was little wonder that Fryreich's next idea was unheard of. Combine 4 different drugs, 4 poisons, and administer that to children. It took knocking a few heads to finally get the regimen approved.
They're always making rules. The federal government regulates all aspects of medicine, in particular, investigative medicine. If you go to Washington and you look for the FDA, I mean, they've got thousands of people whose job it is to interfere with research. That's their job. You hire a guy for the FDA, he's smart, he's capable, he's well educated, and you say, here's your job. Fryrei wants to give patients 4 drugs. What do you think? So he looks at it, he says, great idea. But if I approve this and somebody in Keokuk, West Virginia dies, that's my ass in a sling. I'm not going to approve it. If I approve it and it cures everybody, I don't get any credit.
Luckily, it was eventually approved. Many of the junior doctors refused to participate. Still, it wasn't long until many of the kids who went into the leukemia ward actually got back out of it. Alive.
A 4-year-old's major concern when he's dying of leukemia is, don't tell my mother I'm sick. Their major concern is how their parents react. But they were sure happy to be cured. And by the time we had followed them for about 3 years, well, we learned several things about how to do this. And finally, we published in 1964 a paper that claimed that we had cured childhood leukemia, which proved to be true. And of the 30 children that we treated on those early studies, something like 15 of them are still alive. They appeared on the cover of Cancer Research when they had an anniversary issue. And I still hear from them.
Malcolm writes, today, the cure rate for this form of cancer is more than 90%. The number of children whose lives have been saved by the efforts of Fryrei and Frye and the researchers who followed in their footsteps is in the many, many thousands. Imagine, if you can stand it, that a child in your family is diagnosed with leukemia. Perhaps it's even your child. You'd have a long road ahead of you. There'd be medical bills to think about, emotional support to hone for the poor little one, and emotional strength to build for yourself as you watch them wither with poison. But what if Fryrei and Frye weren't bold enough to create this chemical cocktail? There'd still be the medical bills, the tortured emotions, and the withering child, but a lot more blood, and nothing but a casket at the end of the tunnel where a light should have been. You may think a seemingly callous doctor like Fryrei would be an unlikely savior for so many thousands, but perhaps it was his broken and ill-functioning pieces that made him the perfect man for the job. Fryrei knew pain, deep pain. He knew how to muscle through with a firm jaw and a straight face, as he'd been taught as a kid. It was his cold parts that kept him upright in the face of so much blood and hurt. Perhaps it allowed him to keep his eye on the goal of survival, when other doctors didn't have the heart to administer such poignant chemicals to children. Perhaps it was that temper, so common in adults with a troubled youth, that allowed Fryrei to break all the right protocols to get where his patients needed him to take them. I'd said I wouldn't want to work with Emil J. Fryrei, but maybe it would be good for me. And even if I wouldn't cherish him as a coworker, I'd probably still cherish him as a hero. If my child were sinking in the bloody hell of a misunderstood disease, Fryrei is the rhino-hide cuss of a man I'd want to send in after that child. Broken parts and all. The excerpts you heard from Fryrei came from an interview hosted by the Baylor College of Medicine. It was filmed in 2013, and Fryrei was an old man by then. Like a good little researcher, I listened to more of the interview than what I included here, and I feel I should mention that Fryrei didn't seem cold. You may have noticed that he spoke about his patients and their parents with sincere empathy. He even told a few humorous anecdotes, which went well with his rich old guy laugh. He was constantly smiling. It was a treat to watch. It didn't seem to me like he carried his broken childhood with him to the end. Fryrei, who often went by Jay, passed away in February 2021 at the age of 93. It was COVID-19 of all things that took him. He is survived by his wife, Haroldine, their 4 children, 6 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. I like how Jay is described now. Not a man with an incurable stubborn streak, but a man of incurable optimism. The father of modern leukemia therapy. That guy who saved all the kids. Broken is the word we use to describe our shattered lives, but it's also the word we use to describe our very best days. We have breakthroughs. We break out of our shells when we discover our confidence. We break rules that are outdated or unjust. We break away from the people that clutch at our ankles to drag us backwards, and we break free from our old pains and sorrows. When friends and family band together to come to your aid, they break your fall. We get out there and break a leg when it's time to make our dreams happen. We get in there and break bread when it's time to commune with those we love. For better or for worse, life doesn't quite work right when things aren't breaking. My wish for you is that you sprinkle gold dust on those fractures of yours, and that one day your story will be an inspiration for someone who's tending to their own cracks. That's the end of today's stories. Now we invite you to join us for our weekly Silver Liners Challenge, which is designed to be an easy, actionable step you can take to help boost your week and help you survive hell. Here it is, the Silver Liners Challenge. So you've been broken. How can this make you stronger, better, more beautiful? Find out the answer and never let yourself forget it. Feel free to share your experiences on the comments of our website, www.survivorsguidetohell.com, or on our Facebook page. If you'd like to see the videos and pictures that often accompany our episodes, like some images of Kintsugi artwork, check out that website, where you'll also find much more information, including our storytelling code of ethics. We're always looking for new stories. If you have something you'd like to share, please visit our site and drop us a line. And remember, if you liked this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. If you like Survivor's Guide to Hell and would like to contribute some fuel for our fire, then you're already on the right track. Just listening is the best thing you can do. We've also seen amazing results when our listeners share our episodes with others. If this episode made you think of someone, send it their way. They may be grateful for it, and we will be too. Last but not least, our cheesy joke of the week. A man with broken arms went to see the doctor. The man said, "Doc, will I play the piano after my arms are healed?" The doctor looked compassionately at his patient and said, Yes, you will." The man replied, "Amazing! I've never played the piano before." Thank you, and have an excellent Monday.